Do you want to sleep? Then listen to me. Turn off the lights, close the windows, now close them and listen to you. Finally, I will make a request to you. Put down your phone and listen to my voice. Listen clearly. I will now tell you a story that will make you sleepy. Close your eyes and listen carefully to my words.
Have you ever wondered, history, the very thing we're taught to trust without question, is it truly the only honest picture of our past? Or is it just a tapestry woven from ambition, power, and fear? How many treasures of knowledge were burned to protect the pride of the victors? How many maps, statues, and ancient texts quietly vanished simply because they raised inconvenient questions? And if all of it were brought to light, perhaps our entire worldview would be turned upside down. This isn't a story about cheap conspiracy theories. This is a journey into undeniable cover-ups. Those moments when the truth was edited, when our collective memory was redefined to serve a greater order. There's a paradox few are willing to admit. History is not only about what happened, it's about what people decided was allowed to be told. Since the earliest civilizations, power has always come with the privilege of shaping memory. Emperors, churches, dynasties, and empires didn't just build monuments to celebrate their victories. They burned libraries to the ground, scraped names off stone tablets, and erased their rivals from the records. This wasn't random forgetting. It was a silent project carried out patiently, with a destructive force more enduring than any weapon. When a civilization collapses, people usually remember the crumbling walls and the charred temples. But what always burns first is memory itself. A single missing manuscript can sever thousands of years of understanding. A revised timeline can wipe away the legacy of an entire people, and a story branded as heresy becomes taboo, surviving only as a trembling whisper in the dark. Some scars are too obvious to ignore, like the Library of Alexandria burning in the night, or archives buried deep within the vaults of the Vatican. But there are subtler wounds, a research paper that never gets published, an ancient map dismissed as imaginative fiction, an archaeological question quietly removed from the curriculum to avoid controversy. And with every act like this, the past bends just a little more. Gradually, we grow up believing that history is a clear, linear chain of events, unchanging and absolute, when the truth is often complex, contradictory, and full of shadows. It's this silence that should terrify us most, because when no one dares to ask what has been hidden, the keepers of memory no longer need to burn any books. They only have to wait until the next generation forgets there ever was another story. Ask yourself, who is holding the pen that writes the chronicle the whole of humanity is forced to believe? Are you ready? Because once this door opens, you will never look at the past the same way again. When people think of the Library of Alexandria, they often imagine a vast treasure trove of ancient wisdom, a sanctuary of priceless papyrus scrolls containing works on astronomy, geography, medicine, philosophy, language, and far-off legends gathered from every corner touched by the Greek and later Roman empires. Some historians believe that at its peak, the library held over 700,000 scrolls, an astronomical number for any library of its time. But what haunts us today is not just the scale of its archives, but the mysterious and tragic way it came to an end. The burning of the Library of Alexandria has become a symbol of immeasurable human loss, not just of ink and parchment, but of entire memories and truths that were stripped from future generations. According to surviving accounts, the first destruction occurred around 48 BCE during Julius Caesar's siege of the city. Fires from the harbor spread into nearby storehouses, consuming tens of thousands of scrolls. But that wasn't the last catastrophe. Successive events, Aurelian's invasion, Theophilus's decrees banning pagan beliefs, and eventually the Arab conquest, each swept away more of the library's traces, like waves eroding a shoreline. Still, many modern scholars argue that these weren't just accidents of war. Some theories suggest there was a deliberate effort, a systematic will to eliminate pluralistic knowledge, a kind of knowledge that questioned divine authority, political permanence, and the origin myths of arising religions. Why, some ask, were so many unique manuscripts about Egypt, Persia, Assyria, and lands beyond the Mediterranean gathered in Alexandria? And why did they all vanish together? Was it mere coincidence that toward the end of the Roman Empire, Christian clergy viewed the preservation of pagan teachings as a threat that had to be eradicated? Some indirect evidence, letters from Alexandrian philosophers and Roman scholars, hints that scrolls may have been smuggled out before the fires to be hidden, but no one knows where they went. Other theories suggest the most dangerous works, those that challenged religious or political authority, were intentionally destroyed first. Then the fires were allowed to spread through the rest, erasing the evidence in one final blaze. You could think of the library as a mirror, one that reflected the world too clearly, too truthfully, for those in power to tolerate its existence. Inside its walls were alternate creation myths, cosmic models that didn't center humankind, and records of parallel civilizations that thrived without submitting to a single authority. Had those pieces survived, the story of humanity might have been told very differently, not as a neat, linear tale of chosen empires, but as a rich, tangled tapestry of ideas and discoveries. Today, all that remains are fragments, scattered references, and sorrowful letters from scholars lamenting their loss. Centuries have passed, yet the debate over what truly happened still burns on. Was it a tragic accident, a stray flame in the chaos of war? Or was it a carefully veiled operation clearing the collective memory to make room for a new declaration of power? That question still lingers, defying every attempt at closure. And it leaves behind a vast emptiness, not just of missing pages, but of the belief that knowledge will survive, so long as no one makes it their mission to destroy it. After the tragic tale of Alexandria, few realized that during the same era, in another corner of the Hellenistic world, a second great library rose to become a formidable rival, Pergamon. Perched atop a high hill in Anatolia, Pergamon was not only the capital of a powerful kingdom, but also a vibrant cultural hub where the ambition to collect knowledge was pushed to its limits. At its height, the Library of Pergamon housed over 200,000 scrolls, making it the second largest repository of knowledge in the ancient world, just behind Alexandria. Historian Pliny the Elder recorded that the kings of the Atali dynasty dispatched agents across Greece, Egypt, and Asia Minor to buy or copy any manuscript they could find, as if every scrap of knowledge was a prize more valuable than gold. That ambition, however, made Pergamon the center of a quiet but intense rivalry, what some modern scholars call the Library Wars. According to the geographer Strabo, Egypt's Ptolemy banned the export of papyrus to Pergamon in an attempt to stall its growth. Cut off from traditional writing materials, Pergamon scholars innovated, developing pergamoner, or parchment, made from treated animal skins. In return, Pergamon aggressively pursued rare manuscripts, especially those Alexandria hadn't yet acquired. This wasn't just an academic competition, it was a battle of soft power. Whoever controlled the largest trove of knowledge held the upper hand in shaping intellectual authority across the ancient world. But Pergamon's golden age dimmed as Roman influence crept into Asia Minor. In 133 BCE, upon the death of King Attalus III, the kingdom of Pergamon was bequeathed to Rome through his will, setting the stage for full annexation. And just before that transfer of power, something strange happened.
a large portion of Pergamon's most precious manuscripts vanished, according to accounts by Plutarch and scattered correspondence that survived. Many scrolls were removed under cover of night or destroyed outright. The most widely accepted theory suggests this was an intentional purge meant to deny Rome the use of Pergamon's cultural capital as a tool of control. Others proposed that Roman envoys themselves
collected and redistributed the works, transferring them to Rome or Alexandria, which by then had also come under Roman influence, to centralize knowledge within the empire's grasp. Whatever the truth, the result was the same. Much of Pergamon's intellectual legacy was never seen again. Catalogs disappeared. Original works by philosophers, historians, physicians, and poets vanished from the Roman record. In the shadows of power shifts, knowledge became a silent hostage, not merely removed from its native community, but absorbed into another archive, where others held full authority over what would be preserved, what would rot, and what would be erased from memory entirely. One modern scholar remarked, "If Alexandria was the story of a treasure burned to ash, Pergamon was the tragedy of a treasure dismantled layer by layer, quietly, systematically, until only cold stone walls remained as witnesses." And in that silence, it becomes nearly impossible for future generations to tell what was lost naturally to time and what was deliberately erased to monopolize knowledge. If the theories are correct, the cleansing of Pergamon's library before its handover to Rome may have been a strategy to ensure that later generations would never access the uncensored stories, the ones that might have challenged the official history being written. And that leaves us with a chilling question. How many times in history has knowledge been buried, not because it was useless, but because it was too dangerous for a new order to tolerate? Pergamon is just one example, but it reminds us the collective knowledge of humanity is far more fragile than we think. And sometimes, real power isn't in owning the information, it's in deciding who's allowed to know it. After the destruction of Greco-Roman knowledge in Alexandria and Pergamon, our attention turns eastward to another immense and refined body of literature, the early Buddhist manuscripts of ancient India. Beginning in the 3rd century BCE under the Maurya Empire and the reign of Emperor Ashoka, Buddhist scriptures were compiled and disseminated across the Indian subcontinent. Monks, envoys, and scholars carried handwritten texts, often recorded on palm leaves, bark paper, or etched into stone. According to early records, these manuscripts were preserved in major monastic centers such as Nalanda, Vikramashila, Udantapuri, and many smaller institutions throughout India. For centuries, these archives were believed to contain the most complete and unaltered collections of early Buddhist teachings, including sutras in their original form, and early commentaries retaining their true semantic depth. And yet, most of these manuscripts have vanished. Scholars argue that this loss cannot be explained solely by time, climate, or natural decay. In the 12th century, India underwent violent upheavals as Turkish and Afghan Muslim forces swept through the region. Monasteries were attacked, libraries burned, monks were slaughtered or forced to flee. In the 13th century, the Persian historian Minhaj-i-Siraj described the destruction of Nalanda not merely as a massacre, but as a systematic effort to wipe out Buddhist intellectual foundations, seen as obstacles to Islamization. He wrote that the flames engulfing Nalanda's library smoldered for 3 months, and even from a distance, passers-by could smell the burning of ancient paper carried on the wind. But what puzzles modern researchers even more is the lack of surviving records about manuscripts that monks may have removed before the invasions. Some legends suggest that, in an effort to preserve the Dharma, monks fled eastward carrying precious scriptures into Nepal, Bhutan, and Tibet. Others speculate that a significant number of texts were hidden in remote Himalayan caves, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. Yet centuries have passed, and no reliable evidence has surfaced to prove that the original manuscripts were ever recovered. What remains today are mostly later transcriptions, heavily edited, translated into Chinese or Tibetan, or reinterpreted through different schools of thought.
As a result, scholars can no longer be sure which versions reflect the Buddha's earliest teachings and which have been reshaped over time. Some historians of religion argue that the loss of early Buddhist knowledge was not just a result of war, but also of rivalries between Buddhist schools and shifting political agendas. Each new dynasty had its own reasons to favor or ignore specific texts. Commentaries or philosophical critiques that challenged orthodox views were often deemed dangerous, potentially divisive, and deliberately left out of large-scale copying projects. For centuries, the transmission of Buddhist teachings was not a neutral process. It was shaped by the forces of religion, politics, and academic control. No one can say for sure how much truth was quietly trimmed or concealed while still resting on the library shelves of great monasteries. This quiet disappearance leaves behind a deep void in our understanding of early Buddhism. Had the original manuscript survived, we might see a very different picture of how Buddhist thought formed and spread, perhaps a richer variety of early schools or deeper ties between Buddhism and pre-Vedic Indian philosophy. Today, archaeologists still uncover the ruins of Nalanda and Vikramashila, remnants of bookshelf pedestals and foundational blocks that once supported vast libraries. But the most vital parts, the pages, the words, the subtle insights, have vanished. Their absence suggests not just neglect, but a strategic erasure of collective memory, executed so quietly that no one has ever named the hand that started it. Like Alexandria, Pergamon, and the Buddhist monasteries, the story of India's lost Buddhist manuscripts is not only a tragedy of knowledge destroyed, it's a reminder that the history of ideas has never been immune to the touch of power. And in the end, we're left with a single haunting question. Were those scriptures truly burned to ash? Or are they still out there, sleeping in some hidden mountain hollow, waiting for a time when humanity is brave enough to face the full memory of itself? If Alexandria, Pergamon, and the Buddhist monasteries were victims of war and covert campaigns to control knowledge, ancient China witnessed something even chillinger: a state-sponsored, publicly declared, and historically recorded purge of knowledge, the infamous burning of the books and burying of the scholars under Emperor Qin Shi Huang. This was not merely a symbolic act, it was, in scope and intent, one of the most extreme and methodical efforts to erase collective memory ever recorded in human history. According to the records of the Grand Historian by Sima Qian, the decree was issued in 213 BCE, just after the Qin dynasty unified the fractured warring states into a single empire. The stated goal was to unify thought, to support the newly established regime. But many scholars today believe it was also a calculated move to eliminate historical reference points and suppress any intellectual challenge to the emperor's legitimacy. The event began with the council of Prime Minister Li Si, a staunch legalist who believed in ruling through strict law and ideological conformity. Li Si feared that Confucian scholars and rival schools were still secretly passing down the histories and philosophies of the former states, sowing doubt about the righteousness of Qin rule. The edict demanded that, with the exception of books on agriculture, medicine, divination, and engineering, all historical records, poetry, and classic texts from the former kingdoms be surrendered for destruction. Those caught hiding such materials faced harsh punishment. Within months, an enormous number of texts were collected in the capital of Xiangyang and burned in public bonfires at the imperial court. In those flames, it wasn't just bamboo strips and parchment that turned to ash. It was the spiritual and intellectual legacy of hundreds of years. Philosophies on virtue and music, historical chronicles, reflections on morality and human order, all erased so that history could be rewritten under a single imperial narrative. Some say that night the red glow of burning books lit the entire horizon while scholars watched helplessly, unable to speak out without risking death. A year later, the regime carried out a second, even darker act, the mass execution of Confucian scholars, buried alive as a brutal warning that no dissent against the emperor's authority would be tolerated. However, records from the following Han Dynasty, which replaced the Qin, may not be entirely objective. Some modern historians suggest the scope of the purge was exaggerated, perhaps as propaganda to vilify Qin Shi Huang and legitimize the Han's rule. Archaeological finds have confirmed that certain texts survived in remote regions, hidden by local officials or noble families. Yet even if the extent was embellished, the core truth remains. The Qin dynasty set a dangerous precedent: centralized power claiming the right to decide which knowledge could be preserved and which must vanish. What makes this event especially distinct from other knowledge purges is its open declaration and blunt justification. No excuse of war or religion was needed. The regime plainly stated that intellectual pluralism was a threat to authority. From that moment forward, an empire that built the Great Wall and engineered massive infrastructure projects also planted a deep seed of instability, because no order built on forced amnesia can remain truly stable. Today, as archaeologists examine the ruins of Xiangyang, sifting through the surviving bamboo strips, questions linger. How many texts were lost before they could be copied? How much ancient knowledge on astronomy, philosophy, governance, and ethics was reduced to ash? And deeper still,
modern historians argue that this destruction was not purely religious fervor, but also part of a deliberate cultural erasure. By forcing native populations to convert, colonizers stripped them not only of their gods, but also of the written memory of their origins, ancestry, and land ownership. In the context of colonization, knowledge became a tool of power. Whoever controls history controls identity. The burning of books, then, was not just symbolic, it was strategic, designed to redefine the identity of an entire civilization. Today, when we walk through the ruins of Palenque, Copan, or Tikal, it's impossible not to wonder how many stories were lost in that fire. Advanced astronomical charts, dynastic epics, formulas for eclipse cycles, agricultural rituals, all reduced to smoke. Researchers may never grasp the full depth of Maya thought. Each codex destroyed was a missing piece of an unfinished puzzle. And here lies the final paradox. To reconstruct Maya history, scholars have had to rely on the writings of the very man who ordered its destruction. With all his biases and religious zeal, Dander still left behind a glyph key, the only tool that enabled the 20th century to begin decoding this lost world. But the burned pages will never return, and no one can say how many secrets still lie beneath the ashes, unrecoverable and silent. This story raises a question with no satisfying answer. Was the fire at Manai simply the inevitable result of a clash of civilizations and faiths? Or was it part of a deliberate strategy ensuring Maya knowledge could never again challenge colonial narratives or demand its own place in the world? And if that fire had never been lit, would we see the pre-Columbian history of the Americas with clearer, less distorted eyes? After the fires that consumed the Maya codices, the story of erased knowledge takes us back west to a text once embraced by early Jewish and Christian communities, only to vanish abruptly from the official Bible. This is the story of the Book of Enoch, a manuscript both deeply revered and harshly rejected. According to tradition, Enoch was the seventh patriarch after Adam, a man who walked with God and was taken up to heaven without experiencing death. But what makes the Book of Enoch so extraordinary isn't just its mythic tone. It's the cosmic worldview and theological ideas that clashed profoundly with the doctrines that later came to dominate organized religion. Also known as 1 Enoch or the Book of Henoch, the text is composed of several sections, the most famous being the Book of the Watchers and the Book of the Luminaries. These writings tell of a group of angels, the Watchers, sent to Earth who fall into temptation, teaching humans forbidden knowledge, metallurgy, astronomy, ritual practices, and more. The result, according to the text, was an age of corruption and chaos, culminating in a great flood. These narratives posed unsettling questions for religious authorities. If God's plan for salvation was singular and sovereign, how could there be rogue angels acting independently, gifting humans with sacred knowledge? And if humanity was punished for acquiring knowledge, where exactly was the line between wisdom and sin? During the first few centuries CE, the Book of Enoch was widely read by early Christian communities and the Essenes at Qumran. Fragments were even quoted in the New Testament. Jude 1:14 directly cites a prophecy from Enoch, signaling its once prominent status. But by the 4th century, at the councils of Nicaea and Laodicea, the book was excluded from the official biblical canon, deemed of uncertain origin and heretical. From that point on, copying and distributing the text was banned. In the Latin and Greek Christian worlds, it faded into near-total obscurity. Only the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church preserved it, maintaining the Ge'ez version as part of their biblical tradition. To the rest of Christendom, Enoch became an apocryphal and dangerous work, surrounded by rumors and theological discomfort. For over 1,500 years, European scholars only encountered it through vague references until the 18th century, when Scottish explorer James Bruce brought several handwritten copies back from Ethiopia. The discovery stunned the academic world, offering the first full glimpse of a text that contained elaborate cosmologies, numerological mysticism, and complex portrayals of supernatural beings. Some scholars argue that the suppression of the Book of Enoch wasn't just a theological decision, but part of a broader strategy to control religious knowledge. When the Church sought to define a unified, unshakable dogma, texts that referenced forbidden knowledge or spiritual forces beyond divine control posed a threat. If knowledge could be imparted to humanity outside of God's direct will, the Church's exclusive claim to salvation began to falter. In this light, the Book of Enoch had to disappear, to prevent opening a door to questions that extended beyond approved theology. Today, as we study the surviving text, echoes of Babylonian, Egyptian, and pre-Judaic mysticism can be heard within it, suggesting that Enoch was a bridge between ancient wisdom traditions long since severed. And the questions remain. How many lost versions of the book once existed? Did earlier variants explore even more radical ideas about the origin of human knowledge? And most importantly, if the Book of Enoch had never been suppressed, would our understanding of religious history look completely different? The long silence around Enoch until the 18th century is proof that not all knowledge is lost in fire. Some is buried in darkness, sealed off by those with the power to define what counts as truth. And in the end, we are left with unsettling questions. How many other pages of knowledge once existed, only to be quietly removed so that history could be flattened, simplified, and made easier to control? If the disappearance of the Book of Enoch evokes an image of forgotten wisdom buried in silence, then the story of the Gnostic texts is far more dramatic. A deliberate and highly organized campaign to erase spiritual knowledge, all in the name of protecting the one true faith. Gnosticism, or the Gnostic tradition, flourished in the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, when communities from Egypt to Asia Minor began offering radically different interpretations of the universe, the divine, and the human condition, ideas that clashed sharply with the emerging orthodoxy of the early Christian church. To the Gnostics, the material world was not the perfect creation of an all-powerful God, but the flawed construct of a lesser being, the demiurge. They believed that the human soul was trapped within the body, and only through gnosis, mystical, hidden knowledge, could it ascend back to a higher divine realm. To the early church, these ideas were not just doctrinal errors, they were theological threats. If salvation could be found within, without the church's sacraments, the entire institutional foundation of authority would begin to crumble. Gnostic texts circulated among tightly knit communities, meticulously copied onto papyrus scrolls. They recorded mystical dialogues, many believed to be secret teachings given by Jesus himself to disciples capable of decoding their deeper meaning. The Gnostic library was vast. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Truth, the Apocalypse of Adam, and many others. The Gospel of Thomas, in particular, was controversial for declaring that the kingdom of God resides within each person, no mediator required. By the late 2nd century, church leaders like Irenaeus recognized the growing influence of these heretical texts and began a fierce campaign to eliminate them.
Gnostic writings were condemned as forgeries designed to mislead the faithful, and anyone caught copying or preserving them faced excommunication or even execution. Over the centuries, most manuscripts were systematically destroyed, seized in monastery raids, or buried in secret to escape persecution. The campaign was so effective that for over a millennium, the only knowledge of Gnosticism came through the hostile writings of its enemies. That all changed in 1945, when an Egyptian farmer near the Nile River stumbled upon a sealed clay jar containing 13 papyrus codices, the now famous Nag Hammadi library. Inside were over 50 Gnostic texts preserved almost entirely intact, containing sayings, revelations, and discourses never before seen by modern scholars. When translated into English and other languages, the text revealed a rich metaphysical worldview, a cosmos woven from realms of light, souls born of a divine realm above, and earthly power, including religious institutions, viewed as mechanisms of spiritual imprisonment. For many researchers, this discovery radically expanded our understanding of early Christianity, revealing a plurality of voices before a single version of the faith became orthodox. Some scholars caution against romanticizing Gnosticism as wholly innocent or persecuted. Many Gnostic groups were insular, claiming exclusive access to ultimate truth. But one thing is clear: for over 1,000 years, anyone who copied or preserved Gnostic writings risked death or total expulsion from the religious world. Today, as the Nag Hammadi texts circulate freely in modern languages, a deeper question emerges. If these texts had not been destroyed, would Christian history still appear as a single thread or as a chorus of competing truths? More profoundly, the Church's willingness to ban dozens of works outright shows that religious authority has often been built not just through preaching, but through gatekeeping memory, deciding what is allowed to exist in the collective mind. The Gnostic story leaves us with a question that echoes across time. Were the scribes hunted to protect the faith or to protect its power? And if memory can rise again from a forgotten clay jar,
The Copper Scroll is housed in the Jordan Museum, while replicas, photographs, and translations are displayed in institutions around the world. But the locations it describes, from the tomb in the Valley of Achor to the cave marked by 2 stone pillars, remain unexcavated, or at the very least, no verified findings have ever been made public. Among archaeologists, many admit quietly that the topic is too sensitive, not merely because of money, but because it touches the theological and historical legitimacy of one of the most hotly contested regions on Earth. Thus, the story of the Copper Scroll becomes yet another symbol of how knowledge can be suppressed. Not by fire, not by censorship, but by a quiet, coordinated silence among those with the most to lose if the truth were fully revealed. And once again, we're left with a familiar question. Will a forgotten fragment of the past ever rise to shatter the fog of legend? Or will the truth remain sealed away, buried beneath the thick dust of closed archives? From the high mountains of Bayanchara, the trail now leads us to a concept that's as fascinating as it is controversial: U-parts, short for out-of-place artifact. Coined by zoologist Ivan T. Sanderson in the mid-20th century, the term refers to ancient objects whose age, technology, or context appear inconsistent with the civilization that supposedly produced them. What makes U-parts such a sensitive topic isn't just their challenge to establish timelines, it's the way they're handled. Many large museums have briefly acknowledged, even temporarily displayed, these anomalous items, only to quietly withdraw them later, labeling them unverified artifacts or storing them indefinitely in off-limits archives. One of the most famous examples is the Antikythera mechanism, a complex bronze device recovered in 1901 from a sunken ship off the coast of Greece. Its intricate gear system baffled scholars for decades. Only much later did researchers confirm it was an ancient astronomical calculator with precision comparable to an 18th century mechanical clock. Today, it is proudly displayed at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, but for nearly half a century, the device was kept in storage, dismissed as too advanced for the known timeline of ancient Greek technology. Another frequently cited case is the Baghdad Battery, a ceramic jar with a copper cylinder and signs of acidic residue discovered near Tessin, Iraq in 1936.
Some have proposed that it functioned as a primitive electrochemical cell, possibly for gold plating. Because this didn't align with existing views of Parthenon-era technology, the artifact sat largely ignored in the Baghdad Museum for decades, only drawing attention after a Western publication featured its photo. And there are countless others. The Klerksdorp spheres of South Africa, with seemingly perfect grooves etched into metallic nodules. The London hammer, embedded in a sandstone formation, or pre-Columbian carvings that appear to depict flying machines, all follow a familiar trajectory. Sudden media buzz, followed by withdrawal from exhibition, reclassification as uncertain provenance, or quiet transfer to private collections. Skeptical archaeologists argue that most U-parts are either misunderstood or overhyped, misdated objects, later intrusions into older strata, or even modern forgeries. But the real paradox lies in this. Instead of publicly studying and debunking them, institutions often choose silence. They remove them from catalogs, close files, or refuse discussion. This silence is what feeds larger suspicions that human technological history may be more complex and non-linear than academic models allow. Today, as visitors stroll through the pristine halls of prestigious museums, few realize that beneath their feet, or deep in storage, hundreds of such inconvenient artifacts might lie untouched. They're not authenticated enough to display, yet not destroyed or discarded. They exist in a limbo of denial. The story of U-parts isn't necessarily an accusation of conspiracy. It may be the byproduct of institutional discomfort, the fear of destabilizing a knowledge system too long considered settled. Because if a gear mechanism 2,000 years ahead of its time, or a ceramic battery from antiquity, were definitively proven authentic, it would force us to rewrite textbooks and rethink civilization as we know it. And perhaps that's why these artifacts remain on the margins, reduced to black and white photos, obscure publications, and unanswered questions. From the out-of-place artifacts quietly gathering dust in museum basements, our story now drifts to the East China Sea, where a submerged stone formation once ignited a decades-long debate. Yonaguni, the sunken monument or a natural phenomenon. Located on Japan's westernmost island, just 110 kilometers from Taiwan, Yonaguni became the focus of global attention in 1986 when a local diver named Kihashihiro Aratake stumbled upon a massive rock formation around 25 meters beneath the waves. Early photographs astonished the scientific community. The stone blocks formed near-perfect terraces with sharp 90-degree angles, polished flat surfaces, and grooves that resembled channels or corridors. Following the discovery, a research team led by Professor Masaki Kimura of the University of the Ryukyus began underwater mapping and documentation. In early reports, Kimura described Yonaguni as an enormous architectural complex, including what appeared to be a pyramid-like structure, entry gates, ceremonial stairs, narrow ritual paths, and even faint relief carvings on the walls. He cautiously proposed that the formation could be the ruins of a man-made structure submerged at the end of the last ice age, possibly over 10,000 years old. If true, this would challenge long-standing views about the history of Japan and East Asia, suggesting the existence of a prehistoric civilization capable of large-scale stone engineering long before recorded history. But as media coverage surged, the response from Japanese archaeological and geological institutions grew increasingly cautious. Japan's Geological Society issued an official rebuttal, stating Yonaguni was simply naturally eroded sandstone. Even more curiously, Kimura's own team, the very group that had published the initial findings, began to withdraw from international media. By the early 2000s, interdisciplinary research funding had dried up, and the team's full survey data was no longer publicly updated. Efforts to continue research were quietly shelved. Independent researchers, including Graham Hancock and a Channel 4 documentary crew, attempted to investigate Yonaguni themselves. They reported that key information, sonar imaging, 3D scans, and measurement data had become difficult to obtain. Requests for new funding were met with silence, as mainstream Japanese academics distanced themselves, wary of association with what was quickly being dubbed the Eastern Atlantis. Skeptics argue that Yonaguni is nothing more than a rare geological anomaly, where natural fractures and erosion happen to resemble architecture. But others quietly asked, if it's only a natural formation, Why has so much of the original survey data disappeared? Why aren't sonar scans and 3D maps published in peer-reviewed journals for open scrutiny? Today, if you visit Yonaguni, you can still hire local divers to explore the underwater terraces. You can run your hands along the flat stone surfaces and trace the sharply angled corners beneath the turquoise waves. But you'll be hard-pressed to find a complete official report with side-by-side geological and archaeological evaluations. The story of Yonaguni doesn't just ask what might humans have once built beneath the sea, it raises an all-too-familiar question. Why was a major discovery first celebrated, then quietly buried in silence? Is it fear of disrupting historical orthodoxy, or perhaps just excessive academic caution in the face of a hypothesis too bold to be accepted? And most of all, will Yonaguni remain a monument drowned by waves and silence, or will someone someday be patient enough to uncover its final truth? If Yonaguni raised doubts about how old certain ruins might truly be, the story of medieval architecture in Europe touches on something even more delicate. Has someone at some point deliberately revised the dates of ancient structures to make history more linear, more manageable, and less controversial? Since the 19th century, as historians and architects began systematically cataloging medieval churches, castles, and fortresses across Europe, two primary data sources were relied on: ecclesiastical and royal records and architectural analysis. But over time, small inconsistencies began to emerge. In England, France, and Germany, several sites were found to contain foundation stones, tunnels, or wall segments built using techniques distinctly different from the rest, some resembling Roman or even older. Prominent Gothic cathedrals like Chartres, Reims, and Strasbourg are key examples. During 19th century restorations, architects like Viollet-le-Duc noted foundations with Roman-styled bricks and carvings, but those notes were left vague, never incorporated into the official dating. Why? Because most restoration projects were tightly supervised by the church and historical commissions, both of which were invested in preserving the image of Christian medieval Europe as the clear starting point of all grand architecture. In England, debates arose over structures like Dover Castle and the Tower of London. Subterranean chambers showed mortar and stonework resembling late Roman methods. Early 20th century archaeologists like Frederick Bly Baum publicly questioned whether many so-called Norman or Plantagenet structures were actually built atop much older foundations, with their timelines altered to legitimize newer dynasties. Such questions were often dismissed as non-serious and left out of academic journals. In Germany, Marksburg Castle, a symbol of medieval military architecture, has long been dated to the 13th century. Yet a 1972 survey using radiocarbon dating on mortar and carbonate stone yielded results several centuries older. Researchers were visibly uncomfortable. The results were labeled non-representative, and the official 13th century dating remained unchanged. Some argue there's a simpler explanation: cultural layering. In the Middle Ages, builders often repurposed Roman forts or Carolingian ramparts, expanding or adapting them, then branding them anew.